Good evening, everyone. Welcome to The Outer Realm with myself, Michelle DeRoche, and Miss Amelia Pisano. We are broadcasting live here via International Public Radio on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM and 105.3 FM in New Orleans. Tonight, we do welcome back Steve Burgess to the show. Very exciting. And he will be discussing alien abduction regressions. Keeping in tune with the whole month of disclosure. There we go. That should be fun. But in order to participate in the show, you'll need to pop over to the YouTube channel on UFO Paranormal Radio or International Public Radio pages. And please do subscribe. And also note we will be airing video simultaneously on Twitch, on, I believe, YouTube, 2 YouTubes, maybe 3, depends on how Joe's feeling. It'll be streaming across the network's Facebook pages. You're probably looking at about 8 different spots. So get on in there. Feel free to chat. We can see the chat. We can't respond to all the chat. If you want Amelia to do any typing, guys, you got to head over to UFO Paranormal. Otherwise, we will do our very best to make mention of your comments, but please do note we will at least see them and try to include them in the show if relevant. So, hello.
Hi.
Okay, I'm going to guess that you're just like sharing links, and I should be
just on the last one. I'm on the last one. And,
okay. Okay. Got this. All right. I'll just go and say yes. Add your profile. Okay, good. I'm good. That's all I got to do. That was easy.
Yes.
Perfect. So, all right. So I understand our guest is waiting for us.
Yes,
no pressure.
No pressure. Because it takes a minute to get all of this stuff shared, because we do want to be a part of the chat, and I just want to make sure you know I'm in here. And again, just to repeat what Michelle said, if you want me to type back, you're going to have to go into YouTube. But I can see your comments from all the different streams. And if it does fit in with the conversation, we'll try to add it into the show if we have a moment to do so. Tonight, we're bringing back the extraordinaire, Mr. Steve Burgess, to the show. And if you were here last time, you would know that it was all regression and crazy information and things we didn't know. Tonight, we're taking a turn. Tonight, because of everything going on with disclosure, we're going to be talking a little bit about regression and abductions. Please welcome to the show. Welcome back. He's becoming a friend now, Mr. Steve Burgess. How are you?
There he is.
Hi. That's much easier, isn't it?
Much easier. Wow.
After the last episode, it was a bit scary, wasn't it, when we couldn't get on?
You have no idea. I was mortified that it happened to you. Anytime it happens to a guest, it's terrible. But when it's a guest who is 5 hours ahead of us, it's mortifying. We felt so bad. So we're grateful to be using this new system. How did you find it?
It's really good. Very, very good indeed. Very fast, very simple. Excellent. Yeah.
Good to hear that.
That's good, because if you get sassy, there's a green room that the producer puts you in. We learned it the hard way.
Green room with no alcohol.
Exactly. It's just
what's the point? There's
really
no treats.
Punishment.
You think if we were a good show, we'd pre-send that to you before the show.
Yeah, or at least a packet of biscuits I could steal. And
right? I could arrange a Starbucks somehow, right?
At 2 a.m. over there? I don't know.
I don't know. There's got to be a pub open somewhere.
I'm not sure. Everything's closed. Most things are closed still. And
are they still as well there? I thought you were opening up. I wasn't sure.
We are opening up gradually, just gradually, and more places are opening up. So yeah, it's coming back to some sense of normality.
Not here.
That's good. No,
not here.
Not here.
No, unfortunately.
None here. No.
No, but it is
nice to be back with you, ladies. Thank you for inviting me back. It was I
Oh,
enjoyed
it's
my
our
time with you.
pleasure.
So it's been great to come back with you.
Aw, our
It's our
pleasure. We got a lot
pleasure.
of good feedback. So, I love it when we get good feedback. It just tells us that we're doing everything right and that people love you. And that's exactly what we want to hear. And something just beeped at me. I don't know what the heck that was. But
I
anyway,
don't know.
so we really had wealth in information last time you were here on regressions, and people are always very curious about it. But alien abduction regression.
Hmm.
Do you get a lot of those? That's a little concerning, but
I don't get a lot of them. I mean, obviously, most of the work I do is you could say therapeutic regression, taking clients back into the emotional causes of the problems. And if I just rerun quickly, I regress back into 3 areas: into this lifetime for my clients' lives, in this life, back into past lives, and back into their ancestors' lives.
wow.
So when we're working, and I don't think we covered ancestral trauma actually when we talked last time.
Why don't we start with that? Because that can like segue from the last segment into this one.
Yeah. So the whole regression concept is about releasing the emotional traumas, or most of the regression is about releasing the emotional traumas which cause our problems now. So the regression model is that all of our issues come from locked in feelings and emotions from past traumas. So it doesn't matter where the traumas are, whether it's in this life. Obviously, most of us carry emotional baggage from childhood. Even birth trauma, we often do rebirthing. We go back through the time of our birth. Even pre-birth in the womb. We
Wow.
often bring in traumas from previous lifetimes. And then there is the ancestral traumas. So what we're doing in hypnosis is I'm guiding my clients into trance and then taking them to relive the events, the incidents, which are usually traumatic in the past, which have got locked in the subconscious mind. And the subconscious is then a repository of emotional trauma and the issues that can come from emotional traumas of anything that we suffer from as human beings. So phobias, anxieties, depression, physical problems, sexual issues, relationship problems. Just as an example, the relationship problems, I had a client this afternoon, a lady in the States, I think she's in Ohio, and she's got quite a lot of anxiety in her life, but she's always had a difficult relationship with her mother in this lifetime. And especially in childhood, it was as if her mother didn't want her in childhood. There was no love there. And even now, there's a very, very difficult relationship. In trance today, my client went back into a past life where she was living in sort of not medieval, but London in the 1600s. And she was just an incredibly poor peasant woman, living with incredibly poor peasants in the city, in wooden shacks, in the mud, in the dirt, not enough food. They were all sort of eking a living as best they could. And she was living in that life with her grandmother, who didn't like her. And her grandmother gave her hell, used to beat her regularly, and there was no love there in any way, shape, or form. What happened is, during the session, my client realized that the grandmother in the past life was her mother in this lifetime. So the soul that was the grandmother in the past life has been reborn into this life as her mother. And of course, what's happened is her mother in this life has continued that energy of conflict from the past life.
That's horrible.
So she then understood why her mother doesn't love her, why her mother's been difficult, because in the past life they have this awful relationship. And what then happened is, and I've never had this, as you know, I've been doing this for 29 years. This is my first client who died in the Great Fire of London.
Wow.
This is the first time in 15,000 sessions I've had a client who, I mean, I've even had a Titanic client once, somebody in the Titanic, but this was amazing. It was the first one in the Great Fire of London in 1666.
Wow.
And she experienced, everything burning, smoke, people desperately trying to get away. But in her area of the city, everybody was so poor that hardly anybody could run very fast. And she eventually got trampled on. She fell over as crushed, people trying to desperately get away from the flames and the smoke. And as she laid on the floor, the smoke was so strong that she died of is it asphyxiation or certainly
smoke inhalation. Yeah. Oh my goodness, that's unbelievable.
That's scary.
So,
how do you deal with that?
well, this is all the wonderful thing about regression therapy is if it's done right, the client is able to release that trauma and let go of it. Now, in some cases, that particular trauma would have brought through a physical problem into this life. You could think asthma, for example. Asthma is a classic not being able to breathe. And of course, you could think would directly connect to that death. But actually, the death wasn't the most traumatic point in the life. A lot of past life therapy, past life regression, is releasing death trauma. But in this case, the death was easy. The difficult thing in the life was this awful relationship with the grandmother and the conflict which has been brought into this life with the mother. So now she's aware of that. It means that the difficult energy with her mother in this lifetime can begin to soften. It can begin to relax. It's almost as if some of the threads that were connecting her from that life to this one are going to start being cut now. And the energy with her mother will either improve because the conflict will be less, or they'll actually sort of just find that they become a bit more distant in the relationship and the mother won't be as aggressive with her.
At least now she'll be healing herself because she won't be taking it personally. When you understand where it's coming from, it's a little bit easier to not easy, but I had a rough relationship with my mother till I was about 24, and then I lost her at 27, but we had a chance to heal a lot of it. And a lot of it was just understanding the way she was raised and understanding why she was raising me the way she was.
Yeah.
So I can understand that. That's a true thing that, you can do that work with your clients. I think that's incredible.
I mean, I know we're talking about, we'll come on.
Oh, no. We'll get there. Yeah. We'll get there. We'll recap for everyone. Yeah.
Just as an example of this again with relationships, I have a client in Oslo at the moment with breast cancer. And we've been working on the emotional causes of her breast cancer because every illness has emotional causes. Hopefully, in a way to help her to recover. And she has always had an extremely difficult relationship with her mother. And if you know of Louise Hay, who wrote the wonderful book You Can Heal Your Life, which is this multi-million bestseller, and Louise Hay says that every physical illness has emotional causes. And for her, anything to do with the breasts is about the mothering, the nurturing is wrong.
It makes sense.
The mothering and the nurturing that we should have had, it was represented through the breasts. And therefore, her issue with her mother, this awful conflict, has come out in her body through the breast because she wasn't getting the nurturing and the love that she should have had as a child. So we've been doing quite a lot of work on that for quite a while. And certainly the tumours in the breast are certainly behaving themselves anyway. And she's doing really well in her own self.
Excellent.
That's fascinating. Do you find that when you go back, I think a lot of people confuse, let's say, past life trauma with ancestral trauma. I guess some people call that DNA imprinting sort of thing, right? Ancestral imprinting. Do you find that a lot of it is really just from ancestry?
No, this is actually an accusation as well, Michelle, that some skeptics would say about past life therapy.
Right.
They would say that these are not past lives, these are ancestral memories.
Right.
But the techniques that I use, I've created a system of work in regression over the 29 years. And
Right.
I use a technique with my clients. When I take them into trance, I ask the subconscious, the deep mind, to take control of a finger or a hand. And this happens all by itself. So my client may be just laying there with their eyelids closed, nicely relaxed, because obviously hypnosis is a form of relaxation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll start asking the subconscious to let let's say the finger to feel very light and free. And we find that all by itself, a finger starts to move up in the air. It just floats in the air. And my clients usually are laying there with their eyelids closed, and you can see the look on their faces thinking, what's going on here? I'm not doing that. I am not doing that. My finger is moving all by itself.
Right.
And I then ask the subconscious to use the finger to say yes or no to my questions. So if I ask a question and the subconscious wants to say yes, the finger raises. If it wants to say no, the finger just doesn't move, it stays still.
Mm.
So when my client comes with an issue, and let's say we're working with depression, I'll ask the subconscious, once the client's in trance and we've got a finger response, whereabouts are the emotional causes to the depression? Remember, depression is caused by locked-in anger. So what has happened in the past that's locked anger inside the client? And I'll say, are there any events in this present lifetime causing the depression? And we may get a yes. Are there any past life events? Let's say we get yes. Are there any ancestors, traumas that you've inherited causing the depression? And we may get a yes or no. So the subconscious differentiates between past lives and ancestors' lives.
Mm.
If they were both the same, it wouldn't give me a response for past lives. It would just say yes for ancestors' lives.
Mm-hmm.
So the subconscious gives a different, it knows what the situation is. But my experience, usually it's probably 2/3 past life and 1/3 ancestral trauma.
No, that's
And
interesting.
the ancestral trauma can go back many generations. It's usually in about the past 5 generations or so. Sometimes a bit more than that. I know there are certain shamanic traditions which say that we are working 7 generations back, or we can heal 7 generations back. And usually it is within the last 7 generations, but occasionally it does go before, previous to the 7 generations.
Mm-hmm.
And then what we're doing is we're then regressing back into the life of an ancestor in our bloodline. So we may go back into our parents' life, or our grandparents' life, or our great-grandparents, or great-great-grandparents, or great-great-great-grandparents, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And the aim in the regression is to go back into their life and relive the trauma that hit them so hard that it's come down through the genes in most cases, like, as you say, DNA. It's a genetic thing in most cases.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's like an energy that gets passed down.
Right.
And then the client is in their great-grandparents' life, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And they are then reliving something that's happened in that ancestor's life, which so impacted on the ancestor that they passed the energy of the trauma down, and it's within my client.
Mm-hmm.
And so some clients then are reliving what's happened in their great-grandfather's life, and it's sometimes they're in the body of the grandparent, of the great-grandparent. It's as if they are that person looking out at that ancestor's eyes at things that have happened to the ancestor that bothered them and hurt them. Trauma is trauma. It's happened since time immemorial, and it just is passed down, and we relive that trauma.
Energy is a funny thing because it imprints very easily. If you have an argument, for example, and you're in a room and you just get into a full-blown argument, you leave the room, you come back an hour later, you walk into the room, you start wondering why you're feeling foul. It just imprints itself in time and space. So it would make sense that it would imprint within our own energy or essence also.
I think they call that an egregore, don't they? If there's an energetic imprint in an area, it's good or bad, it's an egregore. So I was out walking, I live in a little village in the UK, and I was out walking in the countryside. I walked yesterday down to an old abbey site, a priory site that
Oh,
was
very nice. Very nice.
demolished in the 1530s in the Reformation.
Oh, terrible.
But the energy in that area is just extraordinary. You can feel it, and this is like a positive egregore. You know, so many people being involved and channeling a spiritual energy. Then it seems to, you know, it still stays there. It resides there, and you feel it. So yeah, and the same with negative stuff. It can be the same as you're saying, Michelle.
Absolutely. It's a residual. I mean, in the world of you know, hauntings, things can imprint and replay, and you know, it's just like a movie that just keeps replaying itself. So to have it, I mean, I guess, you know, we're the ultimate epitome of energy, let's face it. So, you know, I find it fascinating, but I mean, it's a really fine line when you think about it, between ancestral, you know, issues and the past life, considering in this woman's case of the grandmother, it's like the same soul circle or the same essence that just seems to follow itself. You know, her grandmother is now her mother. You know, it's just, it's funny because the energies just remain together.
Yes. It appears that when we die and our soul moves off up into spirit before we get reborn, that, you know, very often the people that have been around us in many lifetimes then come to us as souls. And it's said that there are clusters of souls, groups of souls around our soul. So if our soul is the central soul, and then there are souls around us and souls further away, the ones that are closer are the ones that we get reborn over often many lifetimes in significant ways, as relatives, as husbands, wives, lovers, brothers, sons, etc., daughters. And the ones more on the outside, on the periphery of the clusters of souls, are ones that we are not too close to. We sort of connected, but we don't have very many deep relationships with them. And that seems to be what happens over many lifetimes.
No,
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating how the whole process works. So,
and sometimes, you know, I had a client, I think last week, and it's quite unusual. It doesn't seem to happen very often, but she died in a past life, and she had a really tough life. And when she died and moved up into spirit, she was taken care of, and there was some energetic healing in spirit done on her energy body. And that is quite unusual. I've only ever had that once before, again with a client who, when she died, her soul had been, her heart was dysfunctional in the past life. And actually they took her and they did some work while she was in spirit on her energy body. And they actually found that the heart was malfunctioning. It was like she'd been sent down here with a heart that wasn't working right. So they did some work on it to actually to fix it, so that when she got reborn, then she was functioning with the heart energy was quite correct. That's weird stuff.
That's really bizarre. But fascinating, and I want to believe it. You know, I can't do what I do and then say that doesn't exist, right? It's incredible, because how many times you find within, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 even generations later, a young man is born and they're like, you're the epitome of, you know, our great grandfather, embodiment in every way. Is that just genetic, or is it also the ancestral DNA that's coming through? Because that's almost like it's so kismic, it's so perfect.
Well, there's two things. That's a good question, Amelia. My experience is that it is generally unusual for us to be reborn in the same family line. So, you know, it's unusual, let's say, for somebody now in this life to have been, let's say, their great-great-grandparent in the past life. So usually the past life is different to this lifetime. It's like we go in a different area. But it does occasionally happen that when we have a past life, we sometimes are reborn in this family line as well. So I believe, for example, my youngest son, I believe he's the reincarnation of one of my grandfathers. And I was fairly close to this grandfather, and he was a really awkward cuss. He was quite a difficult. He was a lovely man, but he had his own way of doing things, and he was a tuba player. He used to play in brass bands in England as a tuba. Well, my youngest son at the moment is at university in England doing a tuba degree.
That's incredible. I love it.
I know. It's like, what the heck is that?
And I've always said that I thought it was my grandfather who was being reborn. And in my youngest son, he's a difficult cuss. He was pretty awkward throughout his childhood, although he's wonderful now. But yeah, and I've never mentioned this to my son because I don't want him to be influenced by this. I want him to find out himself if this is the case. But he has a photograph of my grandfather with his tuba in his room. So he's like got a photograph of himself in a past life, you could say, without realizing.
Have you regressed him to find out?
No, he won't let me near him.
It's typical. Our kids want nothing to do with what we do. Unless my daughter is only if she's lost her keys.
I know. It's just
That's it.
You know, my other kids are great. I've got 4 kids, and my other 3. I've done therapy work with all of them, and they're great. You know, if they've got an issue, they'll call me, Dad, can you help me with this? And we'll do some regression work. My eldest son, for example, when I used to play classical guitar, and when my eldest son was 7, I put my guitar in his hands, and immediately his hands went to where he should play. Just immediately, his hands just went to the right place. And I said to my wife, he's a guitarist. And then he started to play the drums as well. And soon after that, so he started to play, and he's now a genius guitarist. He's a genius rock guitarist. He's extraordinary, rock drummer as well. And he plays in rock bands and stuff. Now, I did some regression with him when he was, I think, 10, because he had to have some dental work, and he was really scared about it. So we did some work to sort of release the fear, and we had a bit of time. It was quite quick. So I just said, let me ask your subconscious a question, because my son had always been obsessed with the Beatles. Ever since he was 2 or 3, he was obsessed with the Beatles. And this isn't normal, you know, he's 30 now. So Beatles were way in the past when he was a kid.
Right.
Yeah.
He went back into a past life where he was an amateur drummer in an amateur pop band in the 60s, and he actually went and saw the Beatles live in the past life. So that's where the Beatles came from.
Wow. That's funny. I was going to say, don't tell me he was the Paul McCartney dude that everybody figures just got pecked off and then replaced with another Paul McCartney.
Remember still even traveling around the rumor mill? Wow.
Talking about pop music, though, I had a client in the States. She's an actress in LA, and we did a regression session a few weeks ago, and she appears to be the reincarnation of Jim Morrison from The Doors.
Okay, so that's really interesting. Jim Morrison, did he say what happened to him? That's a big crazy story.
It was a drug overdose. It was
no conspiracy theories, people.
No, it was. She remembered, you know, being in Paris and all the accolades, and it was sex, drugs, and rock and roll, of course, in those days.
Yes.
But it was an accidental overdose that happened. You know, it was just like it took too much drink, and there was a sense of a waste of the life.
Yes.
As she died, and moved into spirit. It was like oh damn, I've made a mistake here. You know, there was quite a regret for the way that he died.
Very aware.
Yeah.
Yes. So now she's still an artist.
So now
Just in a
she's
different way.
yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, so so the ancestral stuff is a very, very significant anyway, and we all carry this, and if we don't release it, then we all have problems. So what the main thing about regression is finding out where the roots are, digging out the traumas, or getting an understanding of what the problem is and what the connection is, and then the problem gets better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's regression.
I think there's a question in the chat, Amelia, if you can grab
He
it.
hasn't posted it yet.
Oh yeah.
He's asking what's the topic so far.
Regression.
Because I have a question for you guys.
Okay, yeah, go ahead and post it. It's past life regression, moving on to alien abductee regression. That's coming. It's coming.
Yeah, I was just gonna type back because he's in YouTube. If you're on the other, I'm seeing a lot of people on Facebook.
Yeah.
I can't respond to you personally, but if you come over to YouTube chat, then I can type back to you. Otherwise, we'll try to read off whatever we can.
Yeah, so
absolutely.
Feel free to fire that question off.
Yeah.
But I do notice in YouTube, going back, Mike Walker made a really good point when we're talking about grandma and mom. He had a little bit of a different situation because grandma and mom are a little bit volatile in both lives. But he says sometimes we love someone so much that we want to experience other aspects of them in other lives as well, like experiencing both sides of the yin and the yang. So, yes, Josh, intrigued UFO topic. Yes, we will get there.
That's what I just wrote.
Yeah.
Michelle and I sometimes share a brain. We're just saying
all the time. Starting to think which life that became a connection.
Steve? Explain that one, Steve. We do share a brain. We'll speak at the same time. I know people say, well, best friends. Yeah.
Yeah. Very eerie. Soul circle thing going on. So yeah, I could see that, wanting to experience, sometimes you just meet people on the street that you feel like you've known forever. And then next thing you know, you just become friends, and that's the way it goes. It's just meant to happen.
I mean, love at first sight is explained by the concept of past lives. We've been together with that person in a past life, and we just connect with them again. And anybody who's experienced love at first sight, I think, would recognize that. It has that. They're in a past life.
Yeah. The only love at first sight I ever had was with my daughter.
Okay.
My husband's going to be like, what? But
it's different with the kids. Just saying. Thank you very
child.
much, Josh.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's kids, We love them all.
Which is a good one because it also brings in, I'm talking a lot about trauma release in past lives, but sometimes sometimes we're reborn with the people close to us, not so much for our learning, but for their learning. So in some past lives, it's not all about what we're doing, it's about we're helping them to learn something. And it's as if we're sort of, even if we, it's one of the horrible things, you may die horribly in a past life at a young age, but it may be that you're helping one of your soul group to learn something which is going to help them in the long term to grow as a soul.
I agree.
That's true, because I see that happen a lot with people also that I work with, and my daughter and I are a good example. I'm pretty sure we're, love, hate, always. We would bicker with her growing up, but we're very much the same. And I keep saying it was the mother's curse, and my mother keeps insisting she never gave it to me. And I'm just kind of like, I'm pretty dang sure you cursed me. You're going to have one just
I have the opposite with my daughter.
Yeah, I would never do that.
I have the opposite with her. I can't. I'm going to die when she gets up and says, you know what, I'm old enough. I need to move out. I'm going to probably go with her.
No, you just move in. You just move in. That's all.
Slowly.
Mention curses there, and occasionally we find curses from past lives will come down. and need to be worked through and released now.
Oh, yeah.
Not very often. I don't get that very often, but there are occasions where somebody has been really badly cursed, and it stayed with them over several lifetimes.
The Italian culture is huge for that. It really is huge for that. It's unbelievable how recent as well. It's not like we're talking 100 years ago, or with my great grandmother. I mean, recent in the last 5 to 10 years, you're still seeing it happen.
Okay, yeah,
Mm.
pretty
Yeah,
horrible.
I would think that would
It
be
is
a lot of
terrible.
mindset, like if you put power into something or put
But they
power
do.
into the belief of something, that would tend to amp right up. But I think
That's-
I've met a lot of, again, people in my field. It's just, it's like, oh, I didn't pay it any mind. But then I always go back to Jacques de Molay, back to the Templars, curse the Pope, curse the King of France, both of them gone in a year. I'm thinking, there's some power behind that somewhere.
Well-
You got two big heavy hitters in 1 year. It's like a double whammy. So, there's something to be said for it. I mean, but
just going back to what you were saying, Amelia, about you both have got telepathy between you, this real connection.
Michelle and I, yes, the only person I have that with.
Okay, so again, the chance. Okay, there could be various reasons, but there could almost certainly be past life connection between you.
it's there.
There definitely is a few.
I had a client in Florida this morning, and she wanted to work on the. She couldn't understand why she had such a close connection with her twin sister. She's a twin sister, and she said, "I just want to understand our connection more. Could we have been around in past lives together?" And so I said, "Well, probably. We don't know for definite, but let's explore it." And she's always had. She's been very protective towards her twin. She said, I'm always very protective, always overprotective towards her. And she went into a past life where she was a young woman in some sort of French town or city, whilst it was being attacked by raiders or an army had overwhelmed the place. And the troops were going everywhere, just killing people, which, as we know, used to happen regularly when it's always happened whenever an army invades, and they'll go into cities and they'll just brutalize and rape and massacre people. And she was a young woman in the life, and she had a young child and a girl, and they were hidden in a cellar with barrels around them, and they could hear what was going on, and there was fire and brutal and screams and people being murdered and butchered. And they were terrified. And of course, then the raiders burst in and slaughtered both of them, my client as the woman and the young daughter. And of course, she realized, and I asked her subconscious to confirm it using the finger, that the daughter in that life was her sister in this present lifetime. So, of course, she hadn't been able to protect her in that life. So she's brought that need to protect her sister into this lifetime.
Amazing.
So
I could completely, see that. I'm sure I must have lost a bunch of kids in one of my lives because I'm a crazy, overbearing, protective parent. My kids
We're
are
only
all
a few
adults, so
years apart,
You can
and
stop now. We're okay. No,
we're only a few
no.
years apart, Michelle and I, and she's that way with me. So
It's like, then they had to introduce a grandchild. Okay, see, now the cycle's just going to keep going. It's not even fair. So yeah, it does get a little bit chaotic. But because as you're telling that story, I'm sitting here going, maybe that's what it is. So
we need to book a session, the two of us with you.
Yes. Good idea. Yeah.
So it's a little much,
We both both together and see what happens.
You may end up writing a book with us too.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Careful what comes out there. Well, thank you, Zach. My mother's overbearing too, with a colorful vocabulary. Okay, I have my moments. The colorful vocabulary.
I got that from my
Depends
mom.
on the situation. So, okay. So now let's start getting into a little bit, if you don't mind, the alien abduction regressions. Just because not a lot of people do them. You know, I know a couple of people who have done them. Techniques seem to vary. How do you even fix something like that? Because like you can't predict when it's going to happen. You can't stop when it's going to happen.
No. And I always say I sit on the fence until I've done the regression and I can make my own mind up as to whether I feel
Right.
whatever comes through is real. Because, you know, it's easy for somebody to say, maybe I've been abducted by aliens. And of course, you know, people can make things up, which are not real. So we have to be careful. And I mean, you know, as I sit here spouting off about past lives, I am also very skeptical. I do want a sort of a sense of science about this, as best we can have science, because otherwise, you know, because I don't believe, for example, in regression that everybody just imagines all these past lives. They're all made up. They're not. When we can come up with verifiable facts, I'll share with you a bit later on a recent client who came up with some incredible verifiable facts in a past life. No way he would have known this. So I am very skeptical in a gentle way. So when if a client says there was possibly an alien abduction, I say, okay, well, we don't know. Let's see what happens. And I think the first client who came to me with this was a man locally in England where I lived, and he'd heard of the work that I do. And he'd had an ET, an extraterrestrial experience, which he couldn't explain, but he felt there was more to it. And it does appear that if a person has I don't like the word alien, it's an extraterrestrial, I think is a better word, because aliens always sounds very negative.
I agree. Yes.
An ET experience. He felt that these things seem to get blanked. It's as if a person has an ET experience, the extraterrestrials are able to sort of wipe the conscious mind memory in some way. But they aren't able, it appears, generally to wipe the subconscious mind. It's as if that is always there operating. And what had happened, the conscious memory he had was a few years earlier, he left a pub in England and he wasn't drunk. He said, all I had was 2 small bottles of lager. That was all. I was very sober. But he said, as I was walking home at about 11 o'clock on a night, I heard a sort of noise behind me. And he said there was some sort of craft that was hovering along behind me. So that really shocked him. So he started to run. And he then remembers seeing some sort of like glowing tent in a park, and he felt that he was ordered telepathically to go to this tent, and he felt something had happened in the tent. He didn't know what. He remembered trying to fight something off, and he managed to then run home. And as he got home and he unlocked the door, and this house was in darkness, he unlocked the door, went inside. He was very upset and very stressed. He locked the door behind him, and then he realized that there was somebody waiting in his house for him. It's as if they'd come into the house in some way, and then he remembered nothing else. So that was the conscious memory. So once I regressed him, we were able to build a bigger picture. We couldn't get everything that happened, but he remembered quite a bit more information. So he remembered that there was a sphere, there was a craft coming along behind him, along a railway line. And as he ran, when he went into this tent, which was glowing, there was a steel table there. And they laid him on the steel table, and they were trying to tie him down. And he sort of kicked out, and he managed to kick out. But what he then found is that he then managed to get home, and he remembered getting home, and then they were waiting for him. And he then woke, and then he woke up the next morning, and his jeans had been taken off, but his boots were still on his legs.
Hmm.
And he had a mark. He had a red sort of mark on one of his legs. There was some sort of blister, as if they put something there. And he then also remembered that same night, as he was running away from the craft or from the tent, he saw a friend of his who was hiding because his friend had seen something which was very strange, and they sort of exchanged words. But that was it. He then ran home. After that, the friend that he'd seen that same night, he remembered later, he said he always used to say he'd had an extraterrestrial experience, and he ultimately committed suicide. It was as if he could never come to terms with it. This was his friend. So he got more information, and then he's contacted me a couple of times over the years to say occasionally the door in the mind opens, what happened, to tell him more about what happened that night. And he's currently writing a book about it as well. So those were all sort of bits and pieces that came through. But I think the best example I can give you of alien abduction regression was when I was invited to take part in a Sky TV program called The Real 4400. And this is still on YouTube. And this is about people who have had missing time experiences.
Yeah.
So it's called The Real 4400, 4400.
Okay.
And the producer had again heard about the regression work I do and asked me to go to see a family up in the north of England who felt that they'd had some sort of weird extraterrestrial experience. And the story was, what they remembered is it was a lady who was in, I think she was about maybe late 30s, early 40s, with her mom, who was in her 60s, and then this lady's two sons, who were I think about 9, 10 or 11 years old. And they got in the car one day to drive to have some lunch together, had some lunch, and then they drove home. But as they were driving home, all of a sudden in the middle of the afternoon, they all saw a spaceship which suddenly came down right next to the car. And as they were driving, this spaceship was flashing lights into the car itself. And they were all, I mean, you can imagine, they were all amazed and astonished. But they all felt an incredible sense of euphoria, this incredible sense of happiness. Then all of a sudden, the spaceship just went, and it disappeared at the speed of light. And they all felt really sad that this had gone, because they'd experienced this incredible sense of euphoria. So, because all the way home they were talking about, this is incredible, we've seen a spaceship. They arrived home to find that the journey home, which should have taken 20 minutes, had taken an hour and 20 minutes. So they'd lost an hour of the time of their life.
Yeah.
There was missing time of an hour.
Yeah.
And they all felt that something else had happened. The boys started to get nightmares. The two ladies were in pieces a lot of the time because they couldn't make sense of it. They were really very, very sad. They got in touch with a local UFO group, and they confirmed that the other people had seen something flying around on that same afternoon in that area.
Right.
So the producer said, would you regress the mom of the two boys? So without meeting them or anything like that beforehand, I wasn't allowed to talk to them in case I don't know, he was a bit worried, I think, in case I implanted something in them. Because then I also must mention that as well. As a regression therapist, we don't lead our clients. It comes on the clients. Because, you know, that's totally wrong. If a regression therapist leads the client anyway, implants things, then that's really unskillful. Because, you know, when a client is in trance, you can sometimes implant stuff which isn't real. So we have to be very careful with our language. So I went to see this lady. We had a quick chat, and she talked me through more or less what they remembered. And then we went straight into filming in her house. The cameras were there and everything. I regressed her back to that incident, and she started to remember so much more of what had happened. What had happened is, as they were driving along and the spacecraft came down alongside them, the spacecraft then went up and it took their car underneath it from off the road.
Wow.
So they were flying along underneath this
Oh, the
spacecraft
car.
with the car underneath. They were then all somehow they were taken out of the car, somehow. And it appears that, and I've got another story again of an alien thing which I'll talk about, where
Yay.
you know, walls are no barriers to these people.
Steve,
sorry
sorry to interrupt you, but are you available after the show for all the nightmares you're giving me right now? Just asking, because you know, I'm starting to wonder how I'm going to be sleeping after this.
I'm just used to it, so please.
The whole car.
The full car. So then all four of them were taken out of the car and they were in the spaceship. She remembered then being in this spacecraft, and it was a sort of a dark steel area, and they couldn't see the beings. They knew there were some beings, they thought two of them, but they were behind a sort of a panel and they kept themselves hidden. And then what happened is these lights, like orbs, started to move around them and move up and down as if they were scanning them. And at that stage, she was laughing. She was in trance. She said, "It's so funny. The boys are laughing. It's just amazing." And this feeling of love and euphoria was just in them all.
That's why. Okay.
It was really beautiful. And then, as the light started to approach the boys to scan them, she started to cry and she got very frightened. She said, "No, no, 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 not the boys, not the boys, no, no, no." And then she calmed right down and she said, "Oh, it's okay. They're telling me, again, telepathically, they're telling me in my head, it's okay. They're not going to hurt us. They just want to check one or two things." And she said that was okay. So she totally relaxed then. And this scanning went on for a little while. I'm trying to remember the rest of it. I think that was more or less it, really. They knew the beings were there. They were talking to them telepathically. And then they were just placed back in the car. The car was moved back down onto the road, and then it moved off straight onto the road, and they carried on driving, and the spacecraft just shot off. So what they'd remembered is the spacecraft coming and shooting off. Now what she'd remembered is actually what had happened. They'd been taken on board that spacecraft. They'd been inspected in some way with these orbs, with these lights, and then they were put back on in the car, and they were okay. And with that knowledge, the relief that she had, that they were not insane, that they were not all going mad. She knew something had happened now that was outside of anything that anybody could ever explain. She knew it was real. And the relief in that lady was massive as a result of that. She was it was like she let go of so much tension. And of course, then she'd be telling the boys and her mom after the regression what had happened, and then they would start to get more memories as well. So that was a very, very substantial experience. And what I'm looking for is, well, you see, people will say to me, "Oh, but this is all imagined." Well, I say this: I've done over 15,000 therapy sessions. I can spot a fantasy experience at 100 paces because they're so obvious. When a client is in trance, experiencing something which really isn't real, the quality of that is so different to what I call the real regression. There's just a different quality. And the quality of her regression was exactly what I look for in a standard good quality regression session. What happened to them was very, very real. And I truly believe, as a professional therapist, but what happened was very real. They were taken on board that spacecraft.
Wow.
Have some of these regressions that you've done with your clients changed the way you look at things and your beliefs over the years?
Oh yes, definitely. I mean, just for one example, the physical causes of illness. When I first read Louise Hay's You Can Heal Your Life 25 years ago, I thought it was nonsense. And now it's like my Bible. It's, when a client has a physical problem, we look for the emotional causes. So
Absolutely. I felt the same way with her the first time I read the book. I'm like, yeah, right. Now I look at it and go, wait a second, this makes a lot of sense. And I could see how, mindset can create different issues and stresses on the body, right? So, but with the UFO, did you always have a belief in it, or did it come?
No, it was really, I've always been interested. I think everybody is. And again, I still can't, I can't believe that we're the only civilization in the universe. That just doesn't make sense. But when I regressed that lady, that really put the icing on the cake for me. That's confirmation, the absolute confirmation, because they were a normal family. They were just a very normal family. They weren't, weirdos. They weren't people with psychiatric illness history. They had no benefit to making this story up. There was no benefit to them to pretending that they had this UFO experience, this ET experience. It was the opposite. It harmed them in a way for a while, but there was no benefit. And again, there's actually, I think, an Australian ex-nurse who's written a book about. She does a lot of regressions with people who claim to have had ET experiences, and she says that in every case, every single person is a normal person. They're not some sort of weirdo. They're not somebody who's trying to prove a point. In fact, in many cases, the fact they've come out to share their experiences actually could damage them. But these are functioning human beings. They have jobs, they live a normal family life. And there's no benefit for them to say these things if they weren't real. So I don't believe in this case, certainly this family were not hallucinating.
No, I know.
I had a girl who was, I think, 14 who came to me. Her mom brought her to me. And she had anxieties, etc. And we went to the cause of that. I didn't expect this. I asked the subconscious if there was a past life, and it said no. Causing it, are there any ancestors' lives? No. Is there anything in this life? It said yes. And she relived a memory of when she was quite young. I think she was 5 or 6. And she was laid in bed as a young girl. And suddenly there were all these lights outside the window in the bedroom. She was 2 floors up. And she got up to open the curtains, and then she saw that there was some very strong lights outside, and she was quite frightened. It was like she couldn't see what it was. So she went back into bed. The next thing, there's a being in her bedroom, and she said it was almost like it looked like the Michelin Man. It was a sort of weird shape, and it talked to her and said, "It's okay, come with me, and we'll go for a ride." And it held her hand, and together they just flew out of, it was like something out of a movie. They just moved together, floated out of her bedroom through the bedroom window, and floated across the sky into this UFO. And then this being, this Mr. Blobby thing, left her, and they left her there, and she was quite frightened. And they did something with her. They sort of put her under anesthetic, and she didn't know what. She said they were very caring. They were like the standard greys, I think, with that sort of shaped head with the big eyes. And they sort of did some experiments on her. She didn't know what, because she woke up later on, and she was laid on some cushions, and they were just talking to her, said, "It's all going to be okay. We'll just leave you there for a little while to rest, and then we'll take you back home." And then the next thing she knew, she was back home in bed again, and she woke up the next morning. So again, she had no knowledge of that. She had no conscious memory of that. And again, she was a young girl, intelligent young girl. No reason why she should invent this story.
No, none of them. And who would? It doesn't make any sense.
That story's pretty, like in that field. I've heard that story many times where they do take you. It happened to someone I know, like right through the wall. He just remembers being along the ceiling, and next thing you know, he was like being pulled out of the house. It's like, okay, didn't remember the story as a child, but remembered it oddly enough as an adult on his own. And a lot of people feel like they're being tracked or beamed out, like out through a light, right? Again, through the wall, through the roof. I'd find that a little unsettling, frankly, but
Just a
get out of my
little bit.
room. Yeah. But yeah, I could see that. Josh, Bob Lazar, what do we think of him? Covered that on the Gray Zone Uncensored. If you check into that show on Saturday, we'll talk more about things like that. Tonight we're talking about regressions. Unless you have a comment about Bob Lazar. All I can tell you is a lot of people are on the fence with it. We'll leave that right there. And
I'd be afraid. Can we manipulate? Like when you do a regression, if someone's too afraid to go that way, what happens then? Because I have a fear of, alien abduction. I have
think she's been abducted.
I have not.
She's a typical class, yes. Just saying.
So that it's a fear. And I'm one of those people that you could hypnotize within seconds. I am that person. I just go out like no tomorrow. It's crazy. It's not so brilliant when you're dating, but it's great later when you need to see a therapist. It's wonderful because I've done hypnosis and I love it. I think it's just the most amazing feeling when you come out of there. I truly, truly I think it's such an important part of healing, especially past life.
I always say I can't be hypnotized.
Yeah, I can be. And you can just go 1, 2, 3, Amelia, you're going to sleep. And I'm like, okay, we're done. I'm good. Meditation comes easy to me as well.
That's quite a gift.
It's hard. It's hard. I still have a squirrely mind, but I get there within the first 10 minutes, which it took years to practice that though.
She's a squirrel.
I am a squirrel. Yeah. I attribute that to a highly intelligent person that I am. I say it's because I'm so brilliant that my mind has to be everywhere at once. And that's why I react that way. I can take on 10 things at once.
Well, go back to the question though, could you be pushed into this without you wanting? Generally, no. I would say in most cases, 95% of cases, no. But there are a few people who are very hypnotizable. You may be one of those.
Definitely.
Who can be sort of pushed and manipulated into stuff. Not many people like that. But of course, if you have had abduction experiences, it is best to get them out. And also, well, that's the other thing, is your subconscious also protects you, though.
Yes.
And if it wasn't safe for you to do so, it wouldn't let you experience it. So,
I would definitely leer towards healing my anxiety in my life before I did that, because I think it would just create more anxiety. That's why I was wondering, how does that work?
Is everybody hypnotizable or not? I say no for myself because somebody tried like a couple times. I know I was completely aware of everything that was going on the whole time.
But everybody's aware all the time. I mean,
you are aware when you're under hypnosis, though.
Exactly. This is one of the myths. So when you're in a trance, you are in a relaxed state generally. You're just focused inwards. So hypnosis is a form of focused relaxation, you could say. So the left brain is still working, still analyzing, still ticking over. But it just helps the subconscious, the deeper mind, to come through more easily. So I think everybody can be hypnotized, provided that they are not drunk, stoned, or mentally not normal.
So a little bit of wine doesn't help.
Well, it helps to relax a little bit, but not too much.
Friend.
That would put me to sleep. The wine would put me to sleep.
No.
I can't drink. There
are different sort of abilities in trance. So I call I say there are 4 abilities. So number 1s, number 2s, number 3s, number 4s. So about 25 to 30% of people are very good in trance. It means that they can go into hypnosis really quite easily. So Amelia, you'll be in this. You'll be in number 1.
See, number 1.
You're number 1.
Overachiever. Overachiever.
Some people are number 2s, and they're good at hypnosis. These are very good. Number 2s are good at hypnosis. Number 3s are average, and most people are just average at hypnosis. So that means they'll experience just relaxation, and not very deep focusing. And number 4s are a few people who are just not good in trance. They tend to be controllers. They tend to be people who don't want to let go. They're often men, I'm sorry to say. So not
I'm
always.
laughing because that's Michelle.
I'm not doing it up. It's not that I don't want to. I'm just very.
You're not even next to me. You're 3 levels down. No, I understand that because it's hard to let go when you're used to. Yeah, I get it. I'm trying to put it so nicely right now.
Really.
I adore Michelle, and without her leadership, believe me, I don't know where I'd be. Sometimes I think
I'm highly aggressive, and I am very authoritative, shall we
you're
say?
not highly aggressive.
So let's just say, I am.
You're
you
protective.
just haven't seen me be highly aggressive.
No, I haven't seen you ever like that.
But I am used to, I mean, I've owned an oil company. I've run it, man's industry, very hardcore, it's hard for me to relinquish my control. Let's put it that way. Maybe it's the easiest way to put it. So
yeah.
I was like, what?
No, I don't find you, I think you're amazing. I don't find you that way. I don't find any faults in Michelle, but I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, again, I had a client recently in Colorado, and this gentleman is a self-made man. He couldn't read until he was 15.
Oh wow, that's hard.
So can you imagine the damage, how hard school was for him?
Yeah.
And even now he's not he can read, but it's not that easy for him.
Yeah.
But he has been so used to being in control of his life, all of his life, because if he didn't, he would have been bullied mercilessly at school. He wouldn't have achieved anything. He'd have ended up on the wrong side of the tracks or whatever. But he has created his own life. He's very successful, runs his own business incredibly successfully. And of course, he's so used to being in control that when Burgess tries to sort of get him to relax and to go inside, he really struggles with it. It just goes against the grain.
Wow.
So, but for somebody like that, very often it's about practicing meditation, practicing trance work.
Well, I can meditate. I just don't like giving up control.
Binaural
if somebody was forcing me to meditate, I may not do it.
You have to pick up the tone in Steve's voice when he's speaking, and then that mellows.
It's like being in labor and finding something soothing. I'm just trying to painfully do something up.
I think it's also easy. I think it's also easy for me because being a medium and working as a remote viewer, you do require that kind of focus to put yourself in a certain place. So I think that's why. But it's hilarious. They can't put me out medically. I fight every drug possible going into surgery. But you go 1, 2, 3, Amelia, and I'm out cold.
Times might have something to do with that, Amelia.
Yeah, that's something that I think we need to set up an appointment about.
Well, did I share with you the last time I was on your show about the operation we did in hypnosis all those years ago with one of my clients without anesthetic? I mean, so it is possible to take the feeling away from the body, so it can be operated on without anesthetic, and then it just makes it so much easier, and then you don't have all the horrible side effects of the anesthesia afterwards.
Here's a crazy one for you. I love going to the dentist. Explain that one. I actually love sitting in his chair. I love when he works on my teeth. I love having my teeth cleaned. I'm serious. It's bizarre, right?
Me too.
Did you do this just now? You were fixing your hair, right?
Yeah, I'll go with that.
I do. He looks forward to seeing me because I'm probably his only patient that does
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, actually, my
I'm
sister
just like,
was
oh,
saying
what
that.
are we doing today, and how are you going to fix this? And
Yeah, wouldn't believe it. Some people do. Yeah.
really, so I'm not just. I'm
No,
not.
my sister's the same. One of my sisters, she
Is
loves
she?
it.
I love
Yeah.
her already. Yes.
So, and yet, talking about dentists and ancestral traumas. So I have a needle phobia, and I haven't
Yes.
really done any work on it. I've done a lot of work on myself over the years, and I have therapy regularly because I believe we need to have therapy to let go of our stuff, become more balanced, especially therapists. But the needle phobia I've not really worked on, so I don't like the dentists. But it comes from my childhood because I was quite sick when I was a kid, and it was quite scary. They were doing things with needles and scratching my arms, doing all sorts of stuff, which obviously traumatized me as a child. But my mother, when she was 15, she had all of her teeth taken out without any anesthetic.
Oh,
And
Wow.
that was by a quack dentist. The quack dentist came to the
That's a
family house.
quack dentist.
well, it has to be a quack. That's a common word in England. It has to be a quack.
Yes.
Yeah. He got paid so much per tooth. So the more teeth he took out, the more he got paid.
Oh,
Mm.
he was a criminal. He wasn't a dentist. He was a criminal.
So, and my mother still says, she said she was in agony for months after that with the pain. But also with the emotional agony. This beautiful 15-year-old woman, girl, all the teeth taken out. So, of course, that trauma, I've inherited that trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So part of my needle phobia is from my mom. Now, my number one daughter has a needle phobia. She's hardly ever had an injection in the whole of her life. Where's it come from? It's come from me, and it's come from her grandma.
See that? Amazing example. Yes.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Like, we're talking phobias and things of that nature. What about positive traits?
I was just going to say that.
I can't in my head. So, okay, Amelia and I would like to know, what about positive traits that you're carrying on from ancestors? Let's say if you were great in battle and you come and you bring it forth in your, whether it be personality, whether it be, as an example, or you're a physician and you come forward and all of a sudden, let's use your grandfather and your son, for example.
There we go. So,
right.
Very often the skills that we have come from either past lives or our ancestors' lives. So, for example, Mozart was a child prodigy, a genius, who was writing, what did he write his first symphony when he was 7 or something? So where does that come from? It comes from a past life, almost certainly. Although his father was, of course, a famous musician. So he's probably inherited it through his father's line. But my guess is he also has brought in past life or lives as musicians into his lifetime now as Mozart. So these positive traits come from both of those places, our ancestors and our past lives. There is also a way of working that I do with past life regression. I call it positive past lives. And with this, what we're doing, we're not releasing trauma. We're going back into a past life to bring some skill or some quality or some resource that my client needs in their life now and bring it into this lifetime. So what that means is, for example, they may lack confidence. Lack of confidence basically means they're frightened. If somebody who lacks confidence has fear inside them, they're scared in the world. So because we've lived so many lifetimes before this one, maybe thousands, maybe more than that, we've done everything. We've been everything. So we've killed, we've been killed, we've murdered, we've been murdered, we've been rich, we've been poor, we've been famous, we've been peasants, etc., etc. So there's a probability that the subconscious can take the client back into a past life to go into a life where they were, let's say, strong or courageous. That's maybe the quality they want in this life to help them with the lack of confidence. So they go back into the past life, they relive part of the life. Let's say they, just as an example, they may have been a great warrior in the past life, not scared of anything, you know, ready to take anybody on. Or they may have been a very successful business person who was very strong, or a politician who wasn't scared about standing up in front of people. So they bring those qualities back into this life, and we then imprint them into this lifetime, so that then they have that quality from the past life now.
I love that. I love that.
So that's positive past life work.
It's good to do both, is it not? To create a balance. And where would you recommend starting? Is it more what the patient wants, or is it something that you assess and then see from there?
Just like ease them into it.
Yeah.
Usually, you see, if there's a big bucket full of negativity inside the client, and we just do positive stuff, well, the negativity sooner or later is going to outweigh the positive. So my preferred way is to do the negative releasing, empty that big bucket as much as we can of the negative stuff. Then when you put the positive in, it works much better. So my preferred way is to work on the trauma release first. And it sounds horrible, and some of the stories, as you know, I tell about people, some of my clients really get into the past life stuff or the ancestral stuff, and they're feeling it, they're crying, sometimes shaking, occasionally screaming, very rarely, but sometimes. So of course people tend to get a bit scared. It's not scary at all.
They're not feeling physical pain.
No. And of course, you know, a lot of past life regression work is death trauma, is releasing the deaths in the past life that is causing the problem now. And I often say to my clients, you know, if we go back into a death in a past life, we don't finish the session today and you open your eyes and you come round and you find that your leg's propped up against the wall in my place and there's blood spattered everywhere. That doesn't happen. You know, this is an energy from the past. So the pain we don't usually feel, occasionally there's a bit of pain, but not very often. It's usually about releasing the trauma, the anger, the sadness, the fear, the anxiety, the guilt.
So do you feel pain, like death, or if you're maimed, or do you feel that pain when you're under?
Usually not. But occasionally people do experience a bit of pain, but it's not that big. And it's over pretty quickly.
The
subconscious protects. So if it isn't safe for the client to experience it, it won't happen anyway. The subconscious is all wise. It's like our higher self, and it knows what the client can take or experience or integrate into this lifetime. So this is why this is safe, totally safe.
That's why it works
as well. The subconscious knows. It just knows. So, and this is a beautiful thing about it. You know, we ask the subconscious and it tells us where we need to go in most cases, and it does the work. So the therapist doesn't have to be clever or all-knowing, because therapists are not clever or all-knowing very often. I know I'm not. It's a question of letting the subconscious do the work, and it does it for us. So we can start the way and we just facilitate the process.
Funny, I've met people who have gone to regression therapy and who have come back, and I don't know if there's a technique of, you know, there's a technique of bringing people in. Is there a technique of bringing people back out? Because these two gals suffered from headaches for, months after, and they couldn't get back in to see this person to try to get it resolved. Is that a thing?
It can happen. It's unusual. My guess, Michelle, is what happened is that the therapist didn't go deep enough into the regression with them, or didn't go back through. Let's say, for example, if in the past life, for example, migraines in my experience are usually caused by deaths in past lives where there's been blows to the head, usually. Did I share this on the previous show, by the
No,
way?
I'm just wondering
we
that
might
maybe
have,
I've
but
had quite a
just
lot
for
of.
anybody who doesn't listen, we don't mind the recap.
No, not at all. I'm just
Yeah.
like wondering if I just must have had all these traumatic, blunt trauma deaths to my head.
Well, we've all done lots, but yeah, some of them tend to be ripening in this life. But as an example of that, and I'll come back to your question, Michelle, in a moment.
Sure.
But as an example of that, I had a young lad came to me with severe migraines. He was 13 years old, and he was getting migraines about every 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and he was missing days off school every time. It was really damaging his schooling.
Yeah.
And his mom brought him, and she sat in the session in my office. I used to work in an office. Now everything's online, of course, but she sat behind me in the office. And bear in mind, this is a 13-year-old boy. He doesn't believe in reincarnation. He doesn't know anything about it. He didn't come to me to prove that his headaches, his migraines were caused by past lives. But once in trance, his subconscious indicated that the migraines were caused by 8 past lives. And this boy was a fast worker. So we cleared all 8 past lives in one session, just over an hour in his case. And the past life, and it was so fast. So for example, he went into the first past life. I can't remember the total order, but let's say the first past life, he was a man who was standing in a garden, and his wife was having an affair with his friend, and she wanted to finish him off. So she came up behind him with a big spade, and she smashes him round the back of the head, and he falls to the floor dead.
Wow.
And he went straight into the next past life, where he was driving a car, in probably the past life before this lifetime, driving a car, and suddenly a truck smashed into the side of the car, and he smashed his head, because it was the days before we wore seatbelts, and he smashed his head on the steering wheel, dead. And he went into the next past life, where he was an old man climbing up a wooden staircase, and one of the stairs gave way, and he fell down, landed on his head, dead. And he went into the next past life,
bad luck.
and somebody came to me with an axe and smashed the axe into his head.
I'm looking for a curse. Yeah.
And he went into the next life, where he was in a bar as a young man, and he got into a fight, and somebody punched him down to the floor, and then they were kicking him in the head, dead. And then he went into the next past life, where he was a young boy at school, and the school bully was being mean to him, and so he stood up to the school bully, and he started to kick the school bully, and the school bully grabbed him by the head and started to smash his head against the wall, and he concussed him, and then he remembered dying as his mother took him to the hospital.
Oh,
Death,
wow.
blow to the head. And we cleared all 8 past lives in one session. And I always remember this. I looked round as he came out of trance, and he came back to full awareness, out of relaxation. And I looked round at his mum, and his mum was sitting there going,
yes.
just had
She was probably, Steve, do you have time for me?
Wow, no kidding.
Completely cured the migraines. I mean, they just went.
That's a beautiful thing.
About 3 months later, his mum called me, and she said, I haven't had a problem. There no problems with the headaches or anything. But the last couple of days, he's been telling me he feels like he's getting a bit of a headache again. So I said, bring him back. We may need to do some more work. He came back for the session. There was a little bit of ancestral stuff that needed releasing, that he'd inherited, and we just worked through that very quickly, and it completely healed.
Amazing.
So, going back to your friend who said they had the headaches after the session.
Yeah.
It's 3 o'clock in the 3:30 in the morning here, and I'm more awake than you are.
That's okay. You probably
You're on a second
Did you have a nap? I didn't get to have a nap. Because that would be cheating.
Maybe you're going into trance for the first time, Michelle.
There you go. You didn't even see it coming. We set it up.
Totally didn't see it coming.
We totally set this up.
Great. Okay, I want some good stuff. Taste and
Could
juicy.
be- It could be that the lady who came out of trance had the headaches for some time. It could be that she had gone into some trauma in the regression session which hadn't been fully released. So quite often we have to go back through the trauma several times in a session to fully clear the energy of it, which isn't fun if it's been a horrible death. But sometimes we have to go back 2, 3, or 4 times to release the energy completely. And unfortunately, not all therapists know that. So they'll often take somebody back once and then bring them back and think the work has been done. It hasn't been done.
Sometimes they do it just because people want to know what those past lives are. They don't even really connect any traumas. So you have people, I think, who do it to say, here you go, here's what you were. And then it doesn't go beyond that. There's no proper way of bringing them out of something like that.
Yeah,
I don't
to me,
think.
that's a carnival thing you have to be really careful with. You need to be with someone who knows what they're doing. You could create more damage.
You've got to be careful. I mean,
Yeah.
it's unlikely that you can damage somebody, but there is a tiny possibility if it's done badly.
Well, for two of them to
book with
go
Steve.
in one day, and they both came out the same way.
They need to book with Steve.
Maybe they haven't been worked through properly. Maybe. So, although occasionally it can happen that you may clear one past life, and in the same session, this client starts to go into another past life, and you don't have time to work on it at that stage. So you have to close it down. Sometimes the energy of that new past life stays with them until you go back in and work through it. Not too often, but my guess is it probably wasn't worked through deep enough and released fully. If it hadn't been, then they would have been fine.
Oh, I wouldn't mind reading this comment if you both are willing.
Yeah, of course.
Mike Walker wrote in Facebook, balancing the right and left part of the brain with binary beats sometimes gives me a headache, but I can chalk it up to like a body sore after a good workout. Oh, okay. I don't get headaches from binaural beats. Maybe you're listening to the wrong ones. What do you think, Steve, with that one?
Could it be that the binaural beats will help you to go into trance very often, because obviously it's equalizing the both sides of the brain and you become more relaxed?
Yeah.
Could it be that once this gentleman has become more relaxed with the binaural beats, but his subconscious for some reason has regressed him spontaneously into something, or half regressed him, because he may be a bit trancy, and again, then he comes back out of that, and there's a sort of a residue of a headache. It could be that he may be just almost spontaneously going into a past life and then not fully working through it, and then coming back without it being worked through, and the residue of the trauma is coming through in the head. Could be.
And then there's those of us who listen to binaural beats and it's euphoric. It's just crazy, but it all depends.
Yeah.
I like working with frequencies whenever I'm just different frequencies through meditation, things like that. You could just feel it in your body, how it changes. It's crazy. You know.
And you've got to remember that, because meditation and many of these things are actually trance. We just don't call them trance. So, once a person starts to gently shut down and go inside themselves, they're actually experiencing trance sometimes without realizing. So, somebody may be experiencing Reiki or having a healing session.
No, that doesn't work for me very well.
They'll be relaxing their eyes, they may be in trance. So then stuff comes through. But
I tried Reiki.
Michelle,
I think Michelle's gonna be holding you back after the show because she's gonna need an appointment.
Honestly, I had someone do Reiki on me. She practiced and basically got accredited in India. She came back here and she did it, and she was a Reiki master. I don't know the whole lingo of the Reiki thing, but she started working on me, and my body started literally shaking and vibrating. She goes, I've never seen anything like this in my life. I think you might have to come back when you're more relaxed. I'm just like, I hold on to my energy to that degree. And I went back like 2 weeks later, and I guess maybe I just trusted her more. I don't know what it was, but then it just did what it was supposed to do, but my whole body started vibrating and shaking like this, and I could hear a humming in my head. I'm like, ET doesn't want you doing that. No. So I don't know. It was an experience.
Something's like,
I'm not kidding when I say I hold on to it.
It's strange.
yeah, we're polar opposites.
You want me to share some strange stories from trance that have been happening recently for me? If you like, I mean, I can share that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh,
anything
all kinds
you
of time. Have
want.
fun.
We love you. Anything you
Mike.
want to talk about.
Mike, vibrating is good. Sometimes, not in this case.
Well,
Ouch.
most regression therapy is just about releasing the trauma or getting an understanding from the past. But sometimes clients come up with what we call verifiable information in the session, which is information they wouldn't know normally, but it comes through in the trance experience. And for me, in many cases, it proves the reality of what they've experienced. It proves they haven't just made this up. This is real. So it happens not too often for me because I'm not looking for information. But I did have a client in Seattle recently, and this gentleman is in real estate, really lovely man, very nice, gentle man. And he went back into a past life where he felt he was in England and he said it's sort of the mid 1600s, 1650s, something like that. And he said, I'm a carpenter living and working in a small village in he called it Berkshire, but in England we say Berkshire. But he said in Berkshire, it's a small village, and he said, it's Upper Bucklebury. That's the name of the village, Upper Bucklebury in Berkshire. I thought, well, I've never heard of that. I've lived in England.
Big name.
But he came up with that name, so I thought, okay, fine. And he said, and what I'm doing, he said, I'm leaving I'm going to go to the New World, he said, because I'm a Quaker, and we're setting up a Quaker colony over there. So he said, as I'm leaving Upper Bucklebury, and for the last time, he said, I'm walking past the church, and he said, I'm really fixated on the church in the village. He said, it's a big white stone building. He said, it's St. Mary's Church in Upper Bucklebury. He said, I've got a strong connection with it, but he said, it's not my church because I'm a Quaker. So then he moved on a little bit, and he said, well, as I'm going to Bristol, he said, to get the boat. We've got a ship that's taking us across to Philadelphia, I think. And he said our king's name is Charles. It's King Charles is the king. And so he came up with all this information. And then finally he said, and the ship that I'm getting to take me across to Philadelphia is called the Bristol Merchant. So yeah, this name of the ship. Now I thought, okay, well, is this real? At the end of the session, immediately I go on Wikipedia, and in Berkshire there is a village called Upper Bucklebury, and guess what the name of the church is? St. Mary's.
Wow. Validation.
So how did he know that? And then, of course, he said 1650s. King Charles II was on the throne in England in 1658. And it was actually King Charles that gave the land to William Penn to create Pennsylvania in the 1680s, I think, or 1650s, where the Quakers mainly settled. And so I thought, how does he know this? I carried on ferreting around, and guess what? The name of one of the ships that used to take Quakers across to the US was the Bristol Merchants. How did he know that? How did he know those facts? This is a man living in Seattle.
You had to have been there.
He's not researched this stuff. I mean, you know, Upper Bucklebury, St. Mary's, Bristol Merchant. It took my breath away. for that matter.
Buckleberry. I just love the name. Buckleberry.
Buckleberry. It's
Say
lovely.
3 times really fast.
I love it.
Yeah.
You get to have such amazing moments just when you're working with them. You must have such incredible moments where you go, wow, this world is just so much more than we realize.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. Sometimes it takes your breath away. What happens? Again, so the next strange story. I had a client recently who, she's a wonderful therapist, lives in Ireland, and very spiritual lady. And she bought a dog last year from a rescue centre. So it was a rescue dog. And she'd wanted a dog for years because her old dog had died many years ago. And she contacted me. She said, look, I love the dog massively, but she's a problem. It's just a problem dog. You know, I give her lots of love, and my partner does, but she follows me around. She's like my shadow. Wherever I go, she's
poor puppy. She's a rescue. Abandonment issues.
Yeah, cute.
She's a problem. She said she's a nuisance when I try to take her for walks. She said I love her to bits because she's a beautiful dog, but she's got problems. Do you think, Burgess, you could do regression work to help the dog to get better? So I said, well, I haven't got a clue, but we can try.
With your paw.
We need you to move one toe.
Yes. Pedal for the tail.
So I said, okay, well, what we'll do is I'll work with you and see if you can get into the dog's past in trance. Because I know this lady's a very good therapist, very gifted therapist, so I know she was going to be good in trance. So we did this. So the dog, by the way, was in a different part of the house, didn't know what was going on. So I took this lady into trance, and her subconscious indicated that, oh, by the way, she'd already contacted a seer, an animal seer in New Zealand.
They're amazing. Yeah.
And this animal seer had given her a 5-page report about what the dog was telling the seer telepathically.
Wow.
They're incredible workers, those people. Yeah.
Including that there was some past lives that needed to be worked on. So my client then went into a past life in the Second World War, where she, my client, was a Nazi guard in a concentration camp. And the dog now was her guard dog. So
that's crazy. What are the chances of that?
Okay, so they spent all the time walking around the perimeter fence, you know, the big barbed wire fences, making sure that nobody was escaping. So, of course, they were very connected in that life. My client was a male Nazi soldier with her dog. They spent all the time together. But what happened is that the Nazi soldier, my client, hated what was going on in the camp and was, had morals, you could say. And at some stage helped some prisoners to escape, but she was found out, or he was found out. And so the Nazis then immediately shot him. And of course, then the dog was bereft. It was left without its owner. All it had known was its owner. And this soldier is killed, and the dog's on its own. So, of course, they are together now in this present life, and the dog is terrified that she will suddenly disappear and go out of the dog's life again, as happened.
That's heartbreaking.
So we worked through that, and after the session, my client said, that answers why. She says, whenever I take her for a walk and we go into the fields in Ireland where we live, she walks around the outside of the fields all the time. And she's looking through the hedges all the time, looking through the gaps.
Wow. Yeah.
Regarding.
Yeah.
So after the session, I saw my client a couple of weeks later again. We did another session. She said there's been a massive improvement with the dog's behavior. a really significant improvement. She said she's so different on the lead. She doesn't follow me everywhere. She she's not my shadow anymore. She said there's a really, we could see the massive improvement.
That's amazing.
So something's happening. So we did another session, and in this session, both my client and the dog were together in another past life as beings from another planet. It's getting even wacky.
Then.
Doing dog therapy on another planet. And they were together in some sort of life form. They weren't humans, but they were both, and they went to they'd been away from their own planet for some time, and they came back to their own planet. And there was some sort of, she found it difficult to describe it, a sort of a malevolent being that was like a cloud of sickness. It just killed everything wherever it went. And so they came back to their place, and there was nobody alive. And then this malevolent cloud thing came to them both and killed them both. They both died in some weird way. So, and also then my client said, I've gone into a past life now. So they died. And then she went into a past life in which she saw the dog being hit with an axe in its head as the dog. So the dog was then owned by somebody else in a dog's past life. And the owner was really brutal with it, and it smashed it over the head with an axe. And one of the things that the animal seer had seen is that there'd been an injury in a past life to the head. And she'd reported this in her report. So my client went into the dog's past life, released the trauma of being hit on the head. And again, we finished the session, and she emailed me the next day. She said, after our session last night, Steve, the dog was so joyous. She was so full of joy for the rest of the evening. Both my partner and I have never seen anything. We've never seen her like that in all the months we've had her. The dog knew that stuff had been released.
She was safe.
It's amazing. People don't get that animals go through things like that also.
Well, again, I've got a client, client in Canada who, and she's a lovely, lovely lady, this client in Canada. She's got a fantastic
I'm kidding. I said you're talking about me.
Of course, you know. Shouldn't mention Canada to the US, should we really? But she's got this fantastic big dog. It's the love of her life, and she's so connected to the dog. About 3 weeks ago, she was driving in her car with the dog, and the car rolled over several times. She had a major accident, and she should not have survived. It was a massive accident. The car went over several times at speed, ended up on its roof. And my client, she came out of the car without a bruise, but her dog, which was in the car with her, was quite badly injured. Its leg was broken. One of its front leg was broken. So she then had to sort of get the dog to the hospital, and it was then operated on. And she sent me an email after that and said, he is not well. The dog the operation's very successful, but he's not himself. He's been traumatized by the accident as I have. Do you think you could do some work on him to help release the trauma? So I said, I don't know. But last week, on Monday, I did a session with her, aiming to release the trauma for her rather than the dog, because I knew she'd been traumatized by it, because she should have died. And the dog was sitting outside of her room. She didn't want to let him in the room in case he tried to jump up, and of course he can't jump up because of his leg. While she was in trance, sharing the memory, going through the car accident, what she remembered, aiming to release the trauma, I heard the dog outside the door. Every now and again, he sort of made a muffled bark. 2 or 3 times he made this muffled bark. And And so, and it wasn't a very good session for my client. Usually she regresses really easily, but it was a bit sort of sticky, and I wondered why it was so sticky. But she emailed me the next day to say the dog has been transformed. He is so much better after my session yesterday. He's eating, he's happier, he looks calmer.
So you were working on the dog and you didn't know it.
That's exactly it. Working on the dog, I didn't know it.
Wow.
Poor baby. He was probably traumatized because he couldn't protect her, and he was all over the place and what's going on.
Could be.
You know, yeah. They're so protective.
This for me, I'm Burgess the dog therapist now.
It's a whole new title. You're going to get a whole new line of people.
Oh my gosh.
I would never have thought that this could be possible. I've always questioned it. If we can do regression on one person for somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, in EFT, when we do tapping, EFT.
Yes, I do that.
Technique. And in kinesiology as well, we do what's called surrogate tapping, where you can work on one person with the tapping and somebody else gets better.
Because you can tap a million, I'll feel better.
Yeah, I can do it for you. I do it. My back of my neck, my chest, my head. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's part of clearing. It's part of clearing before I work with you. We take on all those bad monsters. It's part of what I do. Yeah. But wow.
To me, anyone who thinks that animals are not sentient, I hear that so often. Animals don't have feelings. They don't. I'm just like, what is wrong with you? It makes you completely inhuman to me to think something like that.
Yeah. I know a hypnotherapist near the Liverpool area in the UK. She hypnotizes horses.
Mm-hmm.
And
horses are so beautiful.
A lot of horses can be very highly strung, and they can be. And she certainly she told me that she had a horse which was phobic of going in the horse box. The horse box, you pull on the back of it.
Oh wow!
And it was phobic about going in there. They had a terrible time getting the horse in, and it was so stressed when it was in there. And she hypnotized the horse, and she just talked to it softly and gently, as we do in trance work. The horse sort of started to put its head down and then just stood there with its head down as if it was asleep and its eyelids were closed. And she just gave it some hypnotic suggestions about feeling better, and that, it doesn't have to be scared anymore. Horse boxes are going to be okay for it. And then she brought the horse back out of trance, and it was fine. It wasn't scared anymore of going in horse boxes.
Poor thing. Gentle giant.
It's just reaching the subconscious far down enough to
change
make the connection and change it.
She hypnotized another horse, and as she hypnotized it and took it into trance, it just collapsed in a big heap on the ground.
Oh gosh.
It was completely out. It was just like woof.
There's still hope for Michelle.
Wow. You're gonna collapse over like the horse.
We'll have a mattress waiting for you. I bet you can be. You just don't realize it.
With that statement.
I really believe that she can be hypnotized. I think you think you can't, but
yeah.
Who knows?
I believe
I don't rule anything out. So just like
I think maybe you've got an expectation which is wrong about what hypnosis actually is. And I think also you've got to feel safe with the person you're doing the work with as well.
I did. Yeah, I said just have wine. It'll relax you. Maybe I'll have 2 wines. And then I think I'll be relaxed. So I don't know, but it's not like it was a bad experience. I was just really fully aware. I could hear. He goes, "You're only going to hear my voice." I'm like, I call BS on that because I could hear everybody. It's like I could hear. I was well aware of all the sounds outside. I was well aware of literally everything, and I almost found it amusing at one point when he was saying things. But to myself, I'm going, what? Like, no. But I was fully aware. So to me, because of my reaction, I did not feel like I was in a trance. But maybe it was. I don't know.
Maybe just light. You could have been in a light trance. There are degrees of trance: light, medium, deep. You might just go in lightly. But maybe you need a bit more time or a bit more permission. Sometimes there are permissive ways of of going into trance. Maybe the person was a bit authoritarian, and you maybe also
Just really
rejected that.
relaxed. Maybe I'm just too aggressive. I wasn't paying
Very
attention to what he was
aggressive.
saying.
Dolly says,
I
"Hi, Dolly." She goes, "I can't be hypnotized." The two of you
See?
have some things in common, though, right? So
Yeah, for myself, it's not like I don't want to be. I'm just, it really has to be a reward in it somewhere. It's like you need to tell me something really amazing because I have to see the benefit, but I don't know. It's just, I'm kidding, of course. It's just, I don't know. I guess I would have to try with different people to see if I feel the same as I did then. It could be an entirely different experience altogether.
The easiest way would be to listen to some of my free recordings on my YouTube channel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go onto my free YouTube channel with the free hypnotherapy recordings, Hypno for All, and just relax, listen to my voice, close your eyelids.
So don't do it while I'm driving, basically.
do you wake us up at the end, though, Steve?
Oh.
Do you wake me up at the end of it? Because I might just stay asleep. Your voice is so soothing.
It
It's
is.
unbelievable. I'm so
Okay.
relaxed just listening to you. Seriously. I look and I see you on the schedule. And I'm like, yes, it's going to be a great night.
I was getting hypnotized. So,
Oh, it's just so calming.
well,
Yeah.
and with that being said, we're already at the top of the hour. Jesus, I can't believe that the time flew by so darn quick. So before we go, tell everybody how to find you, anything you want to promote, your books,
Yes, of course. Thank you.
events, anything you want.
Well, my new book came out last year called The Power of Past Life Regression, which is all about my clients' experiences in past lives, what they saw, what they experienced, how it got them better. Lots of the stories there that I love to share. So that's The Power of Past Life Regression. And that's also my Facebook page as well, The Power of Past Life Regression. My website, if people either want sessions with me online, is lionheart-training.com. That's as in Richard the Lionheart, lionheart-training.com. That's the name of my hypnotherapy training organization. And there are also blogs. I've got a lot of blogs and podcasts.
Excellent.
I caught you on SoundCloud.
Oh, you did?
When I went to look for the link for you, I noticed, I said, oh, okay, then, because we're on everywhere. And I said, okay, I'm going to take it from here because he's already on there.
Perfect.
So I noticed you. I'm going to follow you.
Yeah. So I have a WordPress site called hypnoblogpod.wordpress.com, hypnoblogpod.wordpress.com. That's got lots of blogs and podcasts on. And my book, The Power of Past Life Regression, is also available as an audio book as well. So that's available on Amazon, etc. So we recorded that last year, getting some lovely reviews for the book. I'm so pleased that people are saying such nice, kind things. And it makes me think I've done a really good job. So I'm happy with that.
Oh, you are so amazing. I'm serious. You're like hero status for me after we had you on the first time. So many people contact me and said, I got his book. I can't believe I didn't even know they're people I know in my life. I didn't even know they were tuned in. They're like, I have his book. I need to book a session with him. Will he book from Canada? I'm like, yes. So no, it's so amazing. You're doing such incredible work. And I'm so grateful to my friend John Wooler for telling me all about you. But thank you so much for everything.
And thank you for joining us again.
I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me. I love talking about this stuff. It's my job. It's what I do. It's why I'm here on earth, is to get people better.
I love that.
So
yes.
That's all I want to do. So
no, absolutely. Well, we'll do it again. We're booking into the new year, mind you. But if you're patient, we can definitely do it again. But thank you. Now, funny thing about if you've never used StreamYard, the only way to get out, there's a little button at the bottom that's got an X on it that says Leave Studio. Only because people sit there after a while, they're like, how do I get out of here? We don't cut you off. It's the only way out. So thank you again, and happy slumber, because I know it's 4 a.m. over there right now.
Time for bed now. So been great being with you again, ladies. Thanks so much.
Great having you. Thank you so much. What an honor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Well, everyone, we've come to the end of another fantastic segment here on the Outer Realm. Thank you to everybody who tuned in, everyone in chat. Thanks, of course, to our guest, Steve Burgess. Thank you to Joe Montaldo. And please remember to stop by International Public Radio, UFO Paranormal Radio YouTube channels, subscribe. And while you're there, please head on over to the Outer Realm on Facebook. Follow us on Instagram. Amelia keeps it really informative and a lot of fun. If you'd like to see a specific guest or topic on the show, or perhaps you're interested in being on the show yourself, please email us at theouterrealmcontact@gmail.com. Again, theouterrealmcontact@gmail.com. Tomorrow night, we have another fantastic guest returning to the show. Mr. Daryl Sims, the alien hunter, is back, and he will be discussing his continued research on alien abductions and his thoughts on the upcoming U.S. military disclosure of UFOs. So thank you all, and we will see you tomorrow night.